This is Mario Artist Talent Studio. This is something I picked up recently at a retro gaming expo, and you may notice, or at least people that know what 64DD stuff looks like, this is actually a lot bigger than a usual game. For example, this is a normal 64DD. This is Mario Artist Polygon Studio. Talent Studio here I bought as a full big box release, and the main reason and one of the benefits of the release of this game is it comes with something extra. Included, we get this. This is called the Nintendo 64 capture card. While it may look like a blank cartridge from the front, on the back we see that it has composite inputs as well as a microphone input, which is also actually included in the box. And this is one of the main reasons for this big box release, as it comes with both the microphone and the capture card. Now if we go and pull out the instructions, with the instructions here, we can see a demonstration of what they actually want us to plug in here, and it shows a video camera being plugged into the capture card. One of the features of Talent Studio is you can use a physical camera that can output through composite to take a picture of someone and use them as their face in-game. But I was interested, if this was just composite input, what if we plugged other things into this? What if we plugged something that isn't a video camera into it? I don't know, maybe another game system. So that's what we'll be doing today. The fact that this includes both audio channels makes me think that there's more to it than just a video camera, but that's something we'll have to find out in today's video. So we're going to go plug other things into this N64 capture card and see what happens. For the first test, let's try Nintendo's previous home console, the Super Nintendo, with one of my favorite games, Donkey Kong Country 2. That song goes surprisingly hard, harder than it needs to, but without further ado, let's actually get right into this, and we'll start up the whole process. So in here, we'll have to go into the Talent Studio itself. From here, we're going to choose to edit the face. This will give us access to using the capture card, and here we'll just select the capture card. And sure enough, there we are. There's Donkey Kong Country 2 running through a Nintendo 64. Now you may notice it's in grayscale, and unfortunately that's not a problem with the capture card or my capture card. That is just how it displays while this whole process is going. It does display in color if you choose to take a photo, but if you're not taking a picture, it's all grayscale like this, which definitely makes it hard to play in case of like areas like this. It's also not conveyed in the video, but there's actually quite a sizable amount of input delay included in this as well, which does make it a little bit tricky to play something like Donkey Kong Country 2, which requires a bit more precision, especially at these later world levels. But it's definitely playable. I've played worse experiences, so it is definitely an interesting way to experience this game. But yeah, this is what it's going to look like going forward, but enough of a Super Nintendo, or at least Donkey Kong Country 2. Let's move on to the next thing. Well, now that we know that works, let's get a little sillier. Let's try using a Super Game Boy and include more adapters into this nonsense. And back in we go. And now we have the Super Game Boy with Donkey Kong 94, which just continues the chain of random stuff being added into this. So now we have a Nintendo 64 playing a Super Nintendo, playing a Super Game Boy, playing a Game Boy game, and it just continues on from there. This is a pretty high level of absurdity here, but this is one of my favorite games, and this is actually still my original childhood copy, but this was just something I really wanted to see added into this, just how absurd and how many things can get chained together to make this all functional. And here's me struggling to remember how to play this game for a bit. But yeah, sure enough, it continues to function even though we're adding more adapters and more things into this whole mix. Here we have, well, the Super Game Boy functioning. And it is quite impressive, and certainly not the most optimal way to play a game like this. Again, something like this that requires a bit more precision is going to get really tricky with the added input delay. So if anybody was ever crazy enough to actually do this for real, this is something I would genuinely only really do for fun with something like an RPG. But anyway, now that we know that this functions and is playable to some degree, let's continue on from here. Now, let's be even more. What if I use a Nintendo 64 to play a Nintendo 64? This is a Japanese N64 that actually came along with my 64DD. So let's try hooking this guy up to my other N64 and play a 64 through a 64. And, well, there we have Super Mario 64. Playing through another Nintendo 64. Now, this is another good example of something I wouldn't actually try to play through this. However, I think this would be probably the funniest thing to do. Do you think the speedrunning community would unironically accept a 70-star run done this way? It's definitely a lot more noticeable, the input to lag, playing the N64, though I still try to go through it. I even, in fact, try to do a speedrun glitch here. I try to do the bomb clip and bomb on Battlefield to no avail, but it is definitely playable, debatably. This is probably the worst way to play Mario 64. There's quite a few worse ways to play Mario 64, but it does show that, once again, it continues to function to some degree and to some playability. So with that, let's try getting a little bit more absurd. Now, I know what some of you are thinking. Silver, that's not absurd enough. We need to get more absurd. And I got you covered. Let's try using a Nintendo 64 playing an Xbox. Wow, this feels like it belongs to one of those cursed video Twitter accounts. It's kind of funny to see the Xbox boot up screen going through a Nintendo 64 like this. But then I kind of ran into a problem that I kind of forgot about with my Xbox since it's been in storage for a while. The disk drive is very finicky. Yeah, unfortunately, as much as I'd like to show this playing an Xbox game, unfortunately my disk drive just decided it didn't want to play nice today, so it just didn't read any of my discs. I tried a couple times, I even ended up rebooting it a couple times, but it opted to not play nice for me today. So unfortunately, as much as I'd love to show an Xbox game running on a Nintendo 64, that might have to come at a later point. So with that, I guess we'll just move on from here. Now let's try one more thing. And this one, it's the Wii U. Ignore how dirty it is, I've had it since launch. And some of you may be thinking, Silver, isn't the Wii U an HD console? Yes. But if you have the Wii's composite cables, which I do, you can actually connect it through composite as well. So let's go hook up my Wii U to my Nintendo 64. And after changing the settings on my Wii U to actually use the composite cables, well, here we are with the functioning Wii U. And it kind of makes it look like I'm trying to censor my NNID here, but here we have the Plaza. It's all playing through a Nintendo 64. Now, this isn't revolutionary, the whole idea of the Wii U being through composite. In fact, when I got my Wii U, I didn't even have an HD TV, so this is how I played the Wii U at launch, unfortunately. Those that actually knew me from competitive Splatoon may remember that the earliest days I actually still competed while playing on composite. It wasn't until like several months later I ended up getting a HD TV. But yeah, believe it or not, most of my experience at launch of the Wii U was playing through the gamepad to have to not actually stare at the screen in composite. But here we have Wind Waker HD, a game that the whole point was to show off how powerful the Wii U was and all of its graphical capabilities, now all the way scrunched back down to looking worse than the GameCube version did. And it's just kind of funny to look at. Earlier in the video, I mentioned that it stays in grayscale until you take a photo. Well, I wanted to show what that actually looks like, so you can see that, yeah, it does display in color if you take a photo, And now when you actually have a photo, it'll ask you for where the face is in the photo, so you can actually put it onto the model in the game. So here you can see me trying to take Tingle's face and use that as the face for the character. Originally, I was going to end the video after the Wii U part, but I wanted to show off a larger chain of nonsense going on here with the Nintendo 64 again, plugged in with this time the Nintendo 64 Transfer Pack, Pokemon Red, and Pokemon Stadium 2. This ultimately creates the longest chain of hardware and software all into one thing. Here we have the Nintendo 64 with Mario Artist Talent Studio, with the N64 capture card, plugged into another Nintendo 64, plugged into Pokemon Stadium 2, with the Nintendo 64 Transfer Pack, with Pokemon Red inside that, all playing through the Game Boy Tower. It's just absurd. There's a lot of stuff going on in this whole thing, and it's the longest chain of stuff I have in this video. Though there is technically one more thing that I have that could be a longer chain of hardware and software needed, but I'm saving that for another time. But for now, this is the longest amount of stuff I have chained together to make this whole thing function. And with that, that actually brings us to the end of the video. Now, there were other things I could have tried, like I have a Famicom, I have a PlayStation 2, I have other composite devices I could have plugged in, but ultimately the experience would have been the same as the rest of the stuff I've already shown. It would be grayscale, have input delay, and it just wouldn't be the best experience. However, it is quite possibly the funniest experience, one of the funniest ways to play some of this, and does result in the longest chain of equipment needed to play a game with the whole Pokemon stuff. Granted, I did say there is one longer chain I can do. However, I'm going to show that off in probably a YouTube short down the road, so if you're interested in that, please subscribe for that. And if you did enjoy, please let me know. Let me know what you enjoyed of this video, if you actually knew about this, if you knew the capture card existed, if any of this was even interesting. After I picked this game up from the Retro Gaming Expo, the whole point of it was I'm trying to collect all the 64DD stuff, and when I saw that it came with a capture card, I immediately wanted to mess with it and see if this whole stuff was possible. And it is. And it was quite fun to do and quite funny to see. So with that, I want to thank you all for watching, and I will see you all next time.